This critical EDH video is sponsored by TOODEEP, your go-to vendor for non-English foils, signed and altered cards, reserve list staples, judge promos, and secret layers. TOODEEP has cards for every budget, starting at just $5. It's a simple, no-nonsense card feed updated weekly, with monthly giveaways and free tokens in every order. Join the over 6,000 members on Discord and follow on Instagram at DootLootIG.
What is up, everyone? I'm here with Averey from TOODEEP, and this is really exciting for me because actually before I started playing the format, I remember looking at all of the TOODEEP lists on Moxfield, like, what on God's green earth is this Flubs and why is he like this? So it's really fun to get to be here now and get to talk about, I think, our shared favorite deck and hopefully provide a resource for newer players coming into playing Dardo and just kind of, I don't know, do a crash course. But that's my spiel. What's up, dude? What do you got for the people?
Hey, yeah. I mean, I've been playing Dardo for a long time. I picked it up slightly after bans, right after Kellen started going on some crazy runs with it. And I realized that we get a lot of people, a lot of new players, and especially now that the deck's getting so popular, a lot of new players in the Discord asking about resources to kind of get into it. And we don't have anything that's very beginner friendly. It's a lot of really in-depth 2-hour talks about individual card decisions and stuff. So I kind of wanted to make or help make something that's a little more beginner friendly on this.
Yeah, I think you get one of the most common questions in our Discord for Crit is like, hey, I'm getting started in the format, or I'm looking at this deck, what do you recommend that I do? And even as someone who loves any and all Dargo decks, I almost always actively discourage people from playing this right away because it can be so hard to grok, right? There's so many different moving pieces and the resources aren't always that great for getting people up to speed. So hopefully we're able to help. We have a few different deck lists pulled up today. We've got kind of this idea of a core or skeleton list where we have the kind of fixture 85 cards, I think, that almost everybody, if not everybody, is playing. And then Averey is a little bit more on kind of the, like, I don't know if you would describe it as mid-range, but like more mid-rangey, grindier plan.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I was just for sure. It's mid-range in comparison to other lists, but mid-range means a very different thing when you're not in blue, in my opinion. I'm still looking to end the game on turn 3 optimally, but I want the ability to stretch into that turn 4, turn 5 if I need to, rather than just being shut out if I don't get there on turn 2 or 3. So realistically, my mid-range plan is just like I'm more focused on getting Tymna out, getting a couple of draws, trying to amass a little bit more resources before my push so that I have a more solid push where it's like, okay, I might not get there on turn 2 as often, I might not get there on turn 3 as often, but if I do see a turn 4, like, you're going to be met with 3 abolishers plus a win attempt.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm almost guaranteed to get there when I do go for it.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I'm a little bit more on I'm not quite as turbo as like Pontus or Mikey, but I am definitely more inclined on the, like, I'm going to jam my face off and you guys are going to have to deal with it. And so I think between the two of us, hopefully we're able to offer, a varied perspective on the deck, but something that people were able to find useful. And I think what we wanted to start with was just why play this deck, right? Both from kind of a competitive perspective. Obviously, we see it putting up tremendous results now. But that's not the only reason people play CEDH, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into deciding what deck you want to play. So from your point of view, like, why would you pick Tymna Dargo over something else?
I mean, I think I'm going to start off with a non-competitive reason because it's the thing that's kept me on this deck for so long, so just about a year now. And it's almost like Timmy's dream deck, right?
Yeah.
A lot of decks in CEDH, you're playing these really low to the ground optimal strategies where it's just super efficient cards, super small cards too. So it's like you're looking at Blue Farm and you have like Thoracle Decon, you have your Breach combo. They're all just these couple cards really low to the ground. Like Thoracle Decon is, in my opinion, one of the most uneventful kind of ways to end the game.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, okay, well, it's over. Good job, I guess.
Yep.
And I feel like that really throws some people off coming into CEDH where it's like, oh, I did the thing, right? Okay, I guess it's over.
Yeah.
Whereas when you jump over to Dardo, you still get to play these really big flashy cards, and they're efficient and they're optimal to do, right? We have cards like Peer into the Abyss and Bolas's Citadel. We still play the Nas and all of that to get these big flips. And then even our breach lines are different and more complicated and a lot cooler, or you get to do the cool thing where you're just looping Dargo over and over again, making
Yeah.
excess mana, so like giant amounts of mana. So it's like this really cool. You get to still do the big flashy thing, but you get to do it in an optimal CEDH standpoint.
Yeah, I think that every time I assemble a win in this deck, it's almost never the same as something I've done before. And it always requires kind of this extra 5 to 20% of like, what am I even doing? Like, there's so much problem solving, and just you get to be so creative, and you get to do really stupid stuff. And I think part of what makes CEDH a great format is like doing broken things. And I've never felt like I do more broken things in Magic than I do when I'm playing this deck, and it's like going well for me. And then I think maybe I'll index a little bit more on the competitive side for like why play this deck. If you look at results, you know, the new cdhstats.org and a couple of the other aggregating sites, I think at this point Dardo has more diamond wins than Blue Farm does. Or it's something like that. It's either more diamond wins or more diamond top fours or something crazy.
Yeah, the deck takes down big tournaments, like wins the big tournaments. Crazy enough, the deck has won a ton of really big tournaments in the past year. I think if you also look at the new CDH stats sites, Dardo has the highest floor and the highest ceiling on points per game on players.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna pull that up because I think that was really surprising to me. Because I always consider this deck to be really difficult. But we can take a look at this as just kind of a, you know, why play this deck comparison. So this is cdhstats.org. This is a really fun site to kind of play around with and get some data off of. But when you look at Dargo Tymna down here, the floor does have a really big band, but it's really high. And if you look at like Blue Farm's floor, it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually do have the highest point per game ceiling right there with, I guess technically Magda is 0.01% larger or point larger than us. But the ceiling on the deck is crazy.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is it really rewards you for understanding the complexity of the deck. And a lot of the things that you're doing are like pretty hard to interact with. It's, you know, people can only have so many force of wills, and unfortunately 2026 a lot more people have subtlety, but there's only like so many answers people have for the things that this deck is trying to do. And it also has this weird thing. I think my favorite thing I've ever done in this deck was, I think there was a Ristic and a Tithe from a Kenrith, and I was just like jamming my face off. It was just like win attempt, win attempt, win attempt, win attempt. And they're like, dude, you have to stop. You're throwing the game. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure you're going to run out of answers at some point.
Yeah.
And because I had my own Tithe. So like as they're stopping me, I'm getting more resources. And it eventually gets to the point where they do run out of answers. And I put like 5 attempts on the stack in one turn, and I end up winning that game. And there's just this kind of insane ability to keep breaking through whatever wall gets presented by the rest of the pod. And I think that's a really enjoyable experience as a player.
Yeah. I was say, to kind of piggyback off that point, I wanted to say that beyond just being able to push a bunch, this deck is also, and I guess this ties into another reason to choose this deck, it's super highly customizable.
Yep.
Like you had said at the beginning, where we kind of play different versions of the deck. There is really just like a 75 card core at this deck, and then it's kind of pick and choose, season to taste type of deal, where it's like, do you want to be faster? Well, you can tune it to be faster. Do you want to go slower? Do you want to grind? You can tune it to grind.
Yep.
There's a couple stacks versions that have popped up recently. You have the Discord is working on Reanimator. There's people working on really mid-range pieces, even more so than I'm mid-range, where it's like they're playing Trouble in Paris, they're playing Opposition Agent, right? They're looking at some like Archon of Memoria type stuff just to deal like with this slower type of game plan to grind even more into it. So it's like really customizable to you as a player, and that feels really good, because then you just get to play cards you're familiar with and you know you're good with, and it allows you to get really comfortable on the deck. You can spend more time focusing on the complicated stuff and less time focusing on those minute decisions that at the end of, like in the grand scheme of a game, don't matter that much.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that one of the other things that I really love is like the Dargo Discord is amazing. I think it's some of the coolest people I've met in the format, and there's so much openness to brewing. Like if you join other, or if you've participated in other deck specific discords, I think there's this like a lot of sacred cows, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? There's just like this kind of unwillingness to test things or try new things. And that's very rarely the case. I think most of us have the attitude of like, I don't know, bro, I probably wouldn't do it, but you should try it. And we've gotten tons of ideas through that. And I think that's a really cool space to be in.
You have to say, I don't think I've seen a single card in this list not be cut. Like, I know we talked about how Peer to the Abyss is like a big card and Bolsa Citadel, but like we regularly cut those cards to test other things in the slots. Just a lot of brewing and a lot of encouragement to brew new stuff. And the other great thing is like, I think if you look at the stats and you look at the top 20 all-time players, I think the majority of those players are in the Discord and very active in the Discord.
Yeah, I think the only person who's like not posting super regularly anymore is Pontus, but he's like there all the time, right? Like you can kind of pick anyone's brain, and like the deck specific, like the town halls that we do really regularly, Kellen is like, we've turned it into a meme at this point of Kellen's free coaching that he'll do on the deck. But like there's so many resources, and it's, I don't know, hopefully we fill in a gap of like the more beginner friendly stuff. But it's very obvious, as you and I were talking about doing this video, I'm like, this is going to be 3 hours, and not because we're trying to make it 3 hours, but we all just like get so excited. We're like, oh, this is sick. And we just want to keep talking about it.
We're going to try to do our best not to like get into the nitty-gritty individual card decisions and to try to give like a bigger overview of it. But we might delve a little bit into it. I think everyone who plays this deck and likes this deck and mains it is just very excited about it and just wants to talk about it. So, I mean, and I fit right in that category. I can and do talk about this deck all day, every day.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's kind of a natural transition into like what we wanted to cover. And I'm going to pull up the core list just so we can kind of reference cards as we talk through stuff for like ideas. So Averey put this together. This is kind of 85 core cards that basically every deck is playing. And maybe there's like, he just mentioned there's no card that hasn't been cut at some point, but this is a pretty reliable starting point. But what we really wanted to talk about is kind of what the game plan and the play patterns are for the deck. Because especially if you're coming into CDH as a newer player, most people are playing blue in some capacity and or they are not used to Dargo math. And so those are things that you kind of have to simultaneously wrap your head around. And so from your point of view, like what are some of the core ideas from a play pattern perspective that you think would help new players?
Yeah. And if you want to open this to types and tags, I did tag all of the cards in the list too. And we can get a better look at it.
Yeah.
So I think specific to this deck, our like optimal play pattern is we're looking at, if you go down to the mass draw effects, this is really the bread and butter of Dargo and Tymna, where we call them MDEs, the mass draw effects. Obviously, some of these don't actually draw cards like Bolsa Citadel, but they hold that core idea where we are using Dargo's ability to be cast for 1 mana in order to use something like Burnt Offering or Sacrifice down in the rituals to make a lot of mana, and then convert that into a lot of cards through something like Peer into the Abyss that lets you draw half your deck, right? So you can cast Dargo for 1 mana, sacrifice him to make 7 mana, and then boom, you have exactly enough mana to cast Peer into the Abyss. So optimally, you're just looking to achieve that kind of effect, but we have more mass draw effects, and obviously you can see them here, but it's really just you want to get a silence down optimally so that you're protected, draw a ton of cards, and convert that into a win via any of the other combo lines we have in the deck. Once you get a lot of cards in your hand, the deck makes a ton of mana, so it's really easy to assemble a combo afterwards, but that's really just the cleanest way to do it. Other than that, you're really looking to just grind out the game with Tymna, or at least from my perspective and the way I play the deck. I'm really just looking to grind out the game with Tymna until and not try to not look scary until it's time to pop off, because this deck can just pop off from almost 0 resources. I remember, I think I had a game 2 weeks ago where we were going into turn 3 and I had 4 lands total. One of them was a colorless land, and I tapped 2 white, put a Grand Abolisher on the stack, and my opponents look at me and they go, "You have a colorless and a black left after this. So are you pushing? Are you not pushing?" I was like, "Well, let's find out together." And they're like, "We don't think you have it." off of just that. And I was like, all right,
Yeah.
cool. So it resolved. And
Cool
then,
bet. Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, cast Dargo, sacrifice Dargo, make 14 mana. Like I have 14, like almost 14 mana floating in my pool. Here's a Technomancer
Yeah.
for another 7. And it was just like I think on that turn I made somewhere in the order of like 30 plus mana off of that 2 mana, and then just
It's so dumb.
pivoted into a win. You really can't explode from nothing. So it's really like you want to just for me it's just I get down Tymna, I grind, try to look unassuming, amass a lot of resources on my side. The more mana the better, the more cards the better, and then just explode into this win. What about you? From your perspective, what are you trying to do? What's your main game plan?
Yeah, I'm really glad you started with the Master of Effects, because I think that's something that is really tempting to do when you pick up, I don't know how to describe it, like a really combo-centric deck. When you're mulliganing, you're like, A plus B, win game.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what this deck is so good at is abusing Dargo's ability to, like you said, power out these spells that allow you to amass a tremendous amount of resources very quickly. Something to like just walk backwards a little bit. We keep emphasizing this point of Dargo costs 1 mana, but when you read the card Dargo the Shipwrecker, he costs 7 mana.
Yeah.
And so what he does, just as like a TLDR, very short thing, is for all artifacts and or creatures you sacrifice over the course of your turn, Dargo costs 2 less to cast. So if you sacrifice 1 artifact or creature, Dargo costs 5, 2, he costs 3, 3, he costs 1. And then as you continue to go past that point, he continually reduces himself. So even through things like Damping Sphere or God Pharaoh's Statue, if you're trapped in those weird worlds, there is a way to reduce Dargo past those extra cost points, which is kind of interesting. But the joke that is made many, many, many times is that Dargo sees his own sack, because as you're sacrificing Dargo, he counts himself towards that reduced cost, which is what allows you to kind of infinitely loop him, because he's only ever going to cost 1 as long as he's getting sacrificed along the way. So just as a quick description of how that works, but from a play pattern perspective, I'm doing the exact same thing. I am looking for the ability to get to preferably a silence. Depending on the pod, that's not always going to be my highest priority. And then use Dargo or use a whatever, Calling the Weak, Treasure Dork, any of the combinations of like ability to explode and generate a lot of mana out of nowhere to resolve one of these Master effects. And then it's pretty easy to assemble a win from there. I think that something I keep in mind with the deck is like using Necro as an example, I guess, just because we're here, is like, you don't have the same ability that Rockside does of like, okay, I have a Necro with 1 open mana, I'm going to rip 37 cards and win the game. What we do have, though, is this kind of ability to use a Necro to continually refill our hand and sculpt to present multiple win attempts on the subsequent turn most of the time. But something I'm thinking about with this deck a lot is, yes, you can convert out of nowhere, but a huge part of it is like what onboard stuff do you have, or the ability to produce onboard stuff to get that reduced Dargo cost. And so that does require a little bit of setup, and that's part of why the Tymna plan is so good, because you want to be drawing cards, you want to be setting up those attackers, and then you can just as easily get rid of them and use that as, you know, Dargo fodder. And I think that goes a really long way.
Yeah, I was just say, so like we've talked about like the end state of the game plan, but like I think just important is how we get there. And it's really interesting because in Dargo Tymna, with how fast you're going, even in a grindier setup like mine, it's really reduced down. Like I said, I'm still looking at turn 3, turn 4 as my optimal window. So like these ideas of grinding and all of that get like super shrunken down from what you're used to in blue, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm looking to resolve a turn 2 or turn 3 Ristic Study, and then we're just gonna grind it out for like maybe 3-4 turns sometimes, or longer in these slop games. Whereas like with what I'm looking for, I'm looking for a turn 2 Tymna, and the draws that I get from my turn 2 Tymna being 1 or 2 draws and then 3 draws on the next turn. Like that's all I want. 5 cards. Like just show me 5 cards and I'll show you a win, is how I look at it. So if we look at the 1-drop section that I put together, this is like one of the most important things, and we've been really keying in on this recently in brewing, where it's like these 1-drop creatures represent a lot for this deck because they are the tying piece between Tymna and Dargo.
Yes.
You can develop these out, and you can see a lot of them give us value. We have the classics like Esper Sentinel and Ragavan that exist in most decks that can play them, if not all decks that can play them. But they give you this incremental value. They can act as early Tymna attackers to draw you cards once you get Tymna out, but then they also just sit here and act as fuel for Dargo, where it's like,
Yep.
cool, now all of a sudden you can convert all of these pieces that were giving you incremental value over these 3 turns into just an explosive win.
Yep. Yeah, and I think when you look at these, it's actually one of my favorite things about this deck is you look at CEDH All-Star Mardu Devotee.
Yeah.
Or Shambling Guest. Like every time I cast one, I'm like, make a joke. I'm like, here's a little shitter, and then here's another little shitter. They don't really do anything, but they do. They do so much. It's kind of insane. And a lot of these cards, I think that's one of the most common questions we get when people join the Discord is like, hey, why are you playing X one drop? And when you read them on paper, they seem really bad. And then you cast them for the first time. And it's like, oh my God, this is like borderline broken. It's crazy. And they just feed into that game plan so powerfully of turn 1 drop, turn 2 Tymna, draw a card, draw 2 cards, draw 3 cards, whatever. And the density that presents itself off of that is really impressive. And it's something that, I really enjoy about the deck.
And then just as a final point to this one is I want to talk a little bit about like tying into our late game, because we've talked a lot about this early game and those turns 2 through 4 where like it's most optimal for you. But I mean, I feel like a lot of the fear coming into non-blue decks and faster decks is that, oh, if I get blown out early, I just don't play the game anymore. I'm completely locked out. Where the reason we play so many of these 1-drops and we have Tymna, and well, especially for me, the way I play the deck is that a lot of the time you can set up. It's like in Rogside where you have the soft push or Necro, where it's like you land a Necro, you don't think you're gonna get there, so you pay 10 life or you pay 15 life to set up for your next one. So it's that little soft push where you can do a similar thing in this deck where you've set up enough resources to draw you cards on your Tymna to where you can play Dargo out without cannibalizing your whole board, leave up all your value pieces, get Dargo out, and then attempt something there. And if it doesn't get there, then cool. Your fallback is now I still have my 1-drop shitters and Tymna out. I can just keep grinding cards. And then we play such a high density of the silence effects, like, well, actual factual silence, Grand Abolisher, some people are on Myrel, you're on Voice of Victory, some people are on Hexing Squelcher. So we have a very, very high density of these things that let you open a window on your own to where when you stretch into the late game and you get a lot of resources via value pieces and Tymna, you can just present a ridiculous amount of must-answer pieces to where usually you have more than what your opponents can answer. One of my favorite games of all time in a tournament is I started the turn off with a Grand Abolisher that got Force of Willed. I immediately followed it up with a Voice of Victory, where they had to tutor for another Force of Will to get it.
Yeah.
And then I followed it up with a Mass Draw effect, which also ate a counterspell. And then I drew into Alpha Archivist a Ruthless Technomancer. So then I was able to cast Technomancer, which they had run out of creature counterspells at that point, make 7 mana. I didn't have anything to do with that mana, but like actively without running into more counterspells, but I was able to reanimate my Grand Abolisher with Ruthless Technomancer to finally land it and then go through a breach win. So I was like, okay, well here's silence, win, silence, and now I get there.
It's crazy, dude. And there's, I think one of the most important things to recognize through what you just described is like the understanding of how the cards layer together, right? In that like Technomancer is a combo piece, but also sometimes it's just random incidental value or protection. Like there's just so many different things that you start to recognize as you're playing through the deck. Yeah, I think I've been in games where it was like Cavern on Human, GA, Subtletied. Okay, I'm going to draw that card anyway. Here's another GA. Here's another Void. Like you just keep shoving. And I think that yes, there are answers to the things that we're doing, but there are only so many of them. And eventually you find a way. And I think that's one of the really rewarding things about this deck, and really, kind of rewarding things about playing Sans Blue in general, but is you learn so much about navigating windows and pods and how you want to kind of position yourself to be able to win the game without as many counterspell options. And I think this is probably, I'm biased, I think this is the best deck at doing that if you're going to play a Sans Blue pile.
Yeah, I've played a lot of Sans Blue in the year that I picked this deck up. I think since I picked this deck up, I haven't legitimately played a blue deck in a tournament. I've played Rocco, Tymna Halana. I've played just like anything that has come up that has been like a slightly relevant non-blue deck. I've picked up, and without a doubt, this is the strongest one in my opinion that I've played. It's the reason this is the only deck I take to tournaments.
Yep. Yeah, completely agree. And it just rewards you so much for time and seat, I think, where the more exposure you get to it, the more you play it, the better it's going to feel. And I love that part about it.
And we've been dancing around it a lot here, but I kind of want to move on to the next point here, which is just actually getting into the win conditions and combos in this deck. It really falls into two things, and the biggest one, obviously, being what we had mentioned in the play patterns, is the MDs. The reason the MDs are so important is because they get you to your actual combos, and we really didn't talk about those before, so we can look at those now, where I put them in the combos section, if I can find it on my own screen. So everything in this deck revolves around Dargo. In the current iterations of the list, we don't actually have a way to win outside of Dargo, which means that Dranith does stop us. Like, it is the one, that's the thing, I say that we can win around any Sax piece, almost. There's two Sax pieces that actually stop this deck, and that is a Rule of Law and a Dranith Magistrate, because all of our combos revolve around casting Dargo an infinite amount of times. So if you can only cast them once, you can't really get it. If you can't cast them all, him at all, you can't really get it. Historically, the deck has played a couple of other ways to get around it, but let's just talk about how the deck does it right now. So, like Jordan had mentioned, Dargo reduces his cost based on things that are sacrificed. And when you cast him, you can sacrifice things as an additional cost. But the extremely busted thing about Dargo is that he sees himself be sacrificed. So if you are looping him on a turn, so to get him out for 1 mana, you have to sacrifice 3 things to reduce his cost by 6. So then he only costs 1 red. And then if you sacrifice him again, he pays for his own commander tax because he sees himself be sacrificed. So on a turn, if you are looping him, he will only ever cost 1 red for that turn. That allows us to do really interesting things with cards that produce mana via casting him. Namely, in the deck, we have Birgi and Relic of Legends. So Birgi lets you produce, anytime you cast Dargo, you make a red mana. So then you can just use the red mana from casting Dargo to recast Dargo if you sacrifice him. Relic of Legends, very similar in that you can tap Dargo to Relic of Legends to produce a mana of any color. So you can just use that mana to recast him. And then we include a couple of things that let you sacrifice Dargo in order to capitalize on that. So the cleanest one is Goblin Bombardment. Sacrifice Dargo, deal 1 damage to anyone. And then you can just loop Dargo, kill the table with Goblin Bombardment. The other one we ran is Altar of Dementia. This ties in multiple ways in that you can use it to mill your opponents out and then draw them a card via something like Deadpool, or if you're playing Wheel, you can Wheel, or if you have a Breach out, you're able to mill yourself. And Altar of Dementia, we lovingly call our Brain Freeze, even though if you're looping Underworld Breach, Altar of Dementia, Lion's Eye Diamond, it's almost better than a Brain Freeze, because per Lion's Eye Diamond cast, you get 21 cards, so it's a lot easier early than a Brain Freeze is. And then you're able to just obviously just mill yourself out, and then mill the table out, get access to your whole deck, mill the table out, or any other combo from there because you have your whole deck. So those are like the main combos. We also have a little bit more complicated combos with Ruthless Technomancer, and he's a really big card to this deck, really instrumental, in that when he enters, you get to sacrifice Dargo to make 7 treasures, which at face value is awesome. That's for 4 mana. Now you can cast one of your Master effects. Or if you get a copy of him, you can then loop Ruthless Technomancer and Dargo to make infinite treasures. This one's a little more complicated, and I think it requires us to talk about this card specifically instead of just generally, because it is very important to the deck. So you have that second ability on Ruthless Technomancer. You can pay 2 and a black, sacrifice X artifacts to return a creature card with power X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. X can't be 0. So the thing you can do if you have 2 Ruthless Technomancers, which namely you can get that via Jolly Balloon Man or Deadpool, cast the original, sacrifice Dargo to make 7 treasures. Use one of those treasures to recast Dargo, and then cast your thing that can copy him. So whether that be Deadpool or Jolly Balloon Man, and there's a few other options that we'll go over later when we talk about like different cards you can play in the deck. But you will make another Ruthless Technomancer, which will sacrifice Dargo to make you 7 more treasures. Then you're able to recast Dargo and sacrifice the original Ruthless Technomancer to Dargo's cast to get it into the graveyard. And then you activate Ruthless Technomancer's ability to the copy of Ruthless Technomancer's ability to reanimate the original Ruthless Technomancer, which will enter and make you 7 more treasures. This loop costs 6 treasures to do and nets you 7 treasures. So effectively, you can make infinite treasures this way. And then with Jolly Balloon Man, if you're in pre-combat, you're able to then convert those infinite treasures into sacrificing and reanimating Jolly Balloon Man and making infinite copies of any creature on your board to have infinite flying hasty creatures. It's just the Kiki Jiki combo to be able to swing out and kill people. With Deadpool, you're able to sacrifice Deadpool, reanimate him, bring him back with no text box, without stealing a text box, where he has his own, and then infinitely sacrifice Deadpool to draw your opponents out. Obviously, if you have infinite treasures, you can win in a myriad of ways. If you have like a professional face breaker, you can exile your whole deck to play it. If you just have a sack outlet, you have infinite mana, so you can just recast Dargo as many times as you need. But those are the main ones that go through Ruthless Technomancer.
Yeah, and I think that the Deadpool line is particularly interesting to mention because it doesn't matter what your opponents draw for the most part. Like, yes, we are in a world where for some reason people are playing like Word of Seizing and Wipe Away now. But for the most part, it's all activated abilities. So no matter what your opponents do, you're just like, okay, cool, I activate again. Doesn't matter. Like, once you have infinite treasures. And so the kind of scary bit of drawing your opponents their entire deck is largely irrelevant because it doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if you have it pulled up, but we'll probably run through this on Playnext to get a better idea of how it works. Because conceptually, it kind of makes sense, but I feel like a lot of people have a trouble with playing it out. But in regards to like the split second spells, other than Word of Seizing, which apparently people are playing now, there's no
locally they are, unfortunately.
there's no split second spell outside of Word of Seizing that can actually stop this combo in a way that matters if you actually establish infinite treasures before they get it. Because the only time it does matter is Trick Bind at time.
Yes.
All of this can be done at drawing people out with Technomancer, Deadpool can be done at instant speed. So even if they Trick Bind one of the activations, you can just wait until their upkeep and then start it again and draw them out in their upkeep. So there's really no way to stop this once you've established infinite treasures.
No, there's not. And that's so the way that this works, just like in explicit detail, is if Deadpool doesn't take a text box, it's 3 mana, sacrifice this creature as cost. So he's always in graveyard to be reanimated again by Technomancer. And so even if something really weird happens, if you have infinite treasure, Deadpool is in yard sacrificed with each other player draws a card on the stack, and you can just reanimate him again at that point. It doesn't, even if the original ability of each other player draws a card doesn't resolve, because he's in yard, he's a legal target for Technomancer again. So I think it's the cleanest way to win, or at least the safest way. Bombardment is probably cleaner-ish, and it's also just like turning Dargo into like a live machine gun is very satisfying. I enjoy that way of winning as well.
Yeah, recently I've definitely pivoted to Deadpool Technomancer being my go-to combo to try to win the game. It's a very clean 2 creature card combo that is very hard to stop. They need a force of will, they need a subtlety, they need a bounce spell, and even sometimes that's not enough because you'll have the mana to recast the Technomancer if they bounce it, or recast your Dargo if they bounce it, whatever it may be. Right, it's very easy to just refire it on top of interaction if it does happen, and then it also just dodges most interaction anyway. It's just a very clean combo, and then it just wins the game outright if you get it.
Yeah, and I think obviously Breach, LED, Altar of Dementia is a combo, and then there's like, we'd probably be remiss to not talk about Altar of the Wretched in combos as well.
I forgot to add that should be in combo pieces for sure.
Yeah, it's both, right? It is a mass draw effect, but it's also a combo piece. We lovingly refer to him as Walter, and Walter, when he enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a non-token creature. If you do, draw X cards, mill X cards, where X is that creature's power. So if you have Dargo, this is draw 7, mill 7, which obviously with Underworld Breach is pretty busted. But the other thing you can do with this is it is an artifact, so it can be sacked as additional cost to Dargo. And then for some reason, you can pay 2 and a black to return it from your graveyard to your hand. So if you have produced a large amount of mana and you have the ability to continually sacrifice Dargo, recast Dargo, sacrifice Altar of the Wretched as cost, return Altar from your graveyard to your hand, sacrifice, like, it's a very, very, very stupid Magic card that feels like it was designed purely for Dargo.
Also notably, it does loop with LED and Breach as just
Yes.
this will win the game. It's like another brain freeze again, because you're seeing 14 cards into the grave every time you do it, because when you crack LED, you'll discard the 7 cards you drew. You already put 7 cards in the grave. You get 3 Dargo casts per LED cast. I forget the exact math, but it does work out to where you net cards in the net mana and net cards in the grave. So it just works on the loop. I've had tournament games where I literally just kept a hand that was Breach, Altar of the Wretched, and then some other stuff that can get Dargo out early, where and my opponents hated me for this one because I was in a very mid-range pod, very control pod, and it came around to turn 3, and I go, all right, well, people are tapped low. This is probably my only window. Here's Dargo, here's Altar of the Wretched. And it just so happened that no one had anything in that exact moment. Like, they all, if anyone got to on tap, they had stuff. I draw 7, and then I mill, and the first card I mill is LED.
Of course, yeah.
I just look at them all and I just put Breach on the stack, and they're like, "Oh, you just had to have it, right?" I was like, "Oh, yeah." It's just like, "Okay,
sorry,
cool. Here's the win."
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. It's so much fun. And then I guess outlets are probably also part of combo. I don't know if you want to talk about this separately.
Yeah, so outlets are a lot more important in versions that don't necessarily play Jolly Balloon Man as a piece, which a couple of us are not on. Notably, Jordan and I are not on Jolly Balloon Man right now. Historically, we used to play Cursed Mirror. As it came in, it was a copy of Dargo, and it could be fetched off of Magda. So if you were to Technomancer, you could then play Magda, replay Dargo, play Magda, use 5 treasures to find the Cursed Mirror as your copy to Technomancer. And then this is also notable for post-combat Jolly Balloon Man loops. So sometimes you're just in this situation where you can generate infinite treasures and you don't have the actual win. Like the cards that generate the infinite treasures just don't win the game on the spot there. So there's a couple of pieces that can be used as an outlet in the deck for those treasures. Notably, Professional Facebreaker is the most simple one here, where it's just if you have infinite treasures, you can exile your whole deck and boom, you have access to your whole deck. Magda is really nice because once you've established infinite treasures, you can then just tutor all of your artifacts out. You don't need to do that, but you can. You only need to go get Wishclaw Talisman, because then Wishclaw Talisman just puts the piece that wins the game into your hand. So that makes it very clean if you're doing Cursed Mirror stuff, where you can just play, you again have that 2 creature win, where it's just Technomancer, Magda, go get your Cursed Mirror, make infinite treasures, go get your Wishclaw Talisman, get the outlet for the infinite treasures, like Goblin Bombardment, and then you're just there. We did discuss how with Technomancer, you can just start, once you've established infinite treasures, you can just start looping cards from your graveyard. Since you have the infinite treasures, you can reanimate anything from your graveyard, and then you can also sacrifice Dargo again and again so that you can put things back in your graveyard and reanimate them again. So that being said, you have effectively access to infinite ETBs and infinite reanimates. That makes it so that cards like Orcish Bowmasters can be looped from your graveyard with infinite treasures to just ping the table down. Again, we talked about the artifact tutors via Magda that also applies to Goblin Engineer, where you can just keep putting artifacts in your grave. Obviously, you need haste to bring them back, but like Jordan just talked about our favorite card, Altar of the Wretched, that card can just be put back into your hand from the graveyard. So you establish infinite treasures, you cast a Goblin Engineer, you put Altar of the Wretched in the grave, now you can draw your whole deck with the infinite treasures. So we have, like I said, we have a couple outlets for either a post-combat Jolly Balloon Man, or if you're playing pieces that make a copy of Ruthless Technomancer without winning the game. This is also relevant for like I had one game recently where I ragaband and hit somebody's clever impersonator when I had a technomancer in hand,
Sure.
and I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we loop it this way.
Yep.
So there's like weird
Yeah.
edge cases where you can establish infinite treasures but not have a direct win, and knowing the way to convert that into a win if you don't have like just a tutor in hand is very useful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, God, there's so many things to talk about. Where did we have? So this bullet point was win conditions and combos, MDs, tutors, combos. I guess we haven't talked about tutors yet. Is there anything else that you wanted to, like, what else you want to talk about for this segment here?
I think we kind of mentioned our tutors along the way, but I mean, we're playing other than like the standard inline tutor, vampiric tutor, your wish claws, tainted pack, demonic tutor. Obviously, I didn't get them all in here somehow, but into the tags, I'll update that after this. But we were playing like Goblin Engineer and Magda that can act as tutors, and Beseech the Mirror. It's just all your standard stuff, but it's just important to know what you have to use to go get things. I think the biggest one probably to talk about here that is not commonly seen but is very impactful in this deck that can't just go get you any card that you need is Goblin Engineer. This one might seem a little strange to some people, where it's just like it seems slow, it seems weird, but it hits the majority of all of the important pieces for this deck. You can bin an Altar of the Wretched to go get if you have like a Breach in hand or whatever it may be. If you have an LED or a lot of mana, then all of a sudden Goblin Engineer represents a lot of cards. If you have a Sack Outlet in hand, it can go put your Relic of Legends in the graveyard for the combo. Some people are on Goblin Welder, so you can put Bolas's Citadel in the graveyard to cheat it out. And then again, it's just an entomb technically. So if you already have your Breach, you play Goblin Engineer, you can bin your LED, and then pop off from there. A lot of our important pieces are actually artifacts, so being able to go get them is just very good. And some of us play other things like we'll talk about it later, but Pyre of Heroes is a really good tutor that Goblin Engineer can go get.
Yep.
Some people play D-Grid. It's super versatile, and it definitely deserves a spot even without Welder or any supporting pieces.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Ranger Captain also, especially for those of us who are on Mem Night, it's like strangely relevant as a tutor for combo pieces and also just tutor for value. Ranger is a great little guy. And there was one other thing.
Oh, here's a good one. Yeah, I just went to the bottom to see what I had missed, and I'm moving them now, so it'll be updated. But Lively Dirge. Lively Dirge is a super big one for this deck that's not commonly seen. We like to compare this one to Green X Tutor.
Yeah.
What Lively Dirge says is it costs 1 in a black, but it's a spree card from Outlaws, so you can't actually cast it for that cost. But if you pay 1 additional colorless mana, you can entomb. Search your library for a card, put it in the graveyard. And then if you pay 2 additional black mana, you can return up to 2 creature cards with total mana value 4 or less from your grave to the battlefield. Notably, a very important card that we talked about in combos that cost 4 mana is Ruthless Technomancer. So effectively, this says pay 5 mana, entomb Ruthless Technomancer, reanimate Ruthless Technomancer. But also, we've mentioned how a lot of our combo pieces are creatures. You have your Jolly Balloon Man, you have your Burgie, you have your Deadpool, who is also 4 mana, or if you just need a silence or something, right? It just gets all of these pieces into the grave, reanimated. Or it's just an entomb. Again, if you're just breaching, this is just 3 mana, put LED in the grave. This is 3 mana, put anything you need to combo off in the grave. We do use the grave. We do have Savine's Reclamation, and we do have Breach. Some people are on Reanimate. So there's a lot of reasons that just a 3 mana Entomb works, but this also just puts those important combo pieces and combo creatures onto the battlefield.
Yeah, it's also one of my favorite things to do with this card is if like my GA gets forced or whatever, it reanimates your Grand Abolisher, and then you have 2 mana left over from that. And if you bring back like 2 of your little, treasure guys who you sacrifice to try and get Dargo, if you do like a Pilfer and a Freebooter or something, then you effectively ritual as well, because as you sacrifice these to cast Dargo, you generate treasure off of these. And then maybe that's the difference to like cover the gap of what you need mana wise, right? There's like, the card's just so flexible and does a tremendous amount in the deck. So that was one I really liked as well. I guess this is like a little bit specific, but one other thing I wanted to talk about that I think is worth noting, because this comes up for me a lot, is any of the additional cost spells like Diabolic Intent, Sacrifice, Burnt Offering, you can. It's very difficult to describe verbally. I'm going to try my best. If you're breaching, you can sacrifice Dargo as part of the cost of these, and then also escape Dargo from the graveyard to the zone as part of the breach escape cost. So instead of exiling 3 cards from yard, you're effectively exiling 2 cards from yard.
Yeah.
Which can make some otherwise unworkable lines work out really, really, really well. And that's just like one other reason that Dargo is really powerful in the deck. And that one, if people have never seen that before, usually like results in a judge call, but it does work that way. And it's super sick.
All right, I was just say, now that we spent a lot of time on combos, and I think we hit a lot of them, let's move on to our one of probably the biggest questions, and for people coming to non-blue, and one that we get a lot in the Discord is winning windows. Like how do you navigate winning and going for it when you're not playing blue? Like when do you try to win?
Yeah, I mean, God, it just depends, right? Like, I think some amounts of it is you're kind of calculating your odds, and I don't mean like the Rain Man gif of like actually calculating, but it's like, okay, it's turn 2 or turn 3. One blue player has 1 mana represented. The things that actually stop me right now are X, Y, and Z. That doesn't seem super likely, right? Like there's a certain amount of kind of understanding what actually stops you and what's represented at the table, and like being hyper aware of that game state. But there's also just, we have silences. We have very much mini silences that can kind of force open that window. And even like Final Fortune, like we have this whole tag section around opening your window. And I think that the main things I'm keeping in mind is if it's turn 2 for me, if they have it, they have it. You know, what happens sometimes. Anything past that, I'm starting to look more into the like, what can I do to maximize my odds of being able to get through here? And we want to talk about politics at some point too, but I think a lot of what you can do is there's a lot of ways you can gather information from your opponents to better understand what's presented at the table interaction wise or kind of like opportunity wise. And it's just a matter of phrasing those questions or like understanding what to ask. And I know that's something you've talked about a lot in the Discord, but yeah, how are you thinking about finding windows for you?
I think outside of politics, since we're going to dedicate time to politics specifically, one thing I was talking about recently with my wife was that I realized that I've really stopped looking at board states in a way of what cards are there, what mana is represented, and more I follow the flow of power in a game. In that, everyone does this subconsciously. Like everyone understands when someone's ahead and when someone's behind, but I don't think people really spend enough time consciously thinking about this and what it means based on what they're doing. So so for example, right, the easiest example here is somebody taps out into Ristic Study, right? Well, if they're ahead, that suggests something very different than somebody who tapped out into Ristic Study who's behind, right? In essence, if you're just looking at the board, they're the same thing. They tap 3 mana and played Ristic Study. Like the cards say the same thing. But if the person is in a dominating position, like you kind of can understand that they're ahead in this flow of power where they've maybe they have a ton of cards in hand and they developed really well and they're very obviously in the lead, whether that be maybe they're just in first seat and that's the reason they're in the lead. It kind of suggests to you that instead of it being a desperate play, it's just a play of I am secure enough to tap out into this Ristic Study and not die. So if they're in the lead, maybe when they tap into Ristic Study, maybe they have interaction to back it up. Versus somebody who's way behind, if they're tapping out an Ristic Study, it reads as almost a desperate play. Like, I am so far behind, I need this Ristic Study to resolve so that I can get cards and then maybe survive, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they have anything to stop you with. So if you really follow this flow of power in the game, it tells you a lot of information about why people are making plays that they're making. So I think a lot of how I look at my windows and I identify my windows for trying to push a win is following this flow and understanding why people are making the plays that they're making, and then what that means for what they could possibly be holding up. Because like in the same way you said, it's like if you have a combo, you can kind of piece together exactly what needs to happen to stop you, and then you can kind of calculate the odds of what people have. So if like a lead player taps out into a heuristic study, you can assume that they have a free piece of interaction. Well, what free piece of interaction exists? Well, Force of Will, Mind Break Trap, Pact of Negation. Which one of those actually stop you based on your sequencing? If you only have to cast one spell and that one spell is Grand Abolisher, well, they need Force of Will plus a blue card, or Subtlety plus a blue card, maybe Disrupting Shoal plus a 2 cost. It's like, well, if this is turn 3, how likely is that to happen? And then you just put the Grand Abolisher on the stack. And that's the other thing too that I think people they really get into their own heads about with playing non-blue decks. And a piece of advice that really helped me on this deck that I got from one of my teammates was their interaction doesn't line up with you as well as you think it does, or as well as they think it does normally. So they might have interaction, and they might say they have interaction for you. It doesn't necessarily mean that that interaction actually stops you. You tend to imagine the worst scenario in your head. And if you let that voice talk you out of trying to win when you do have what seems like a window, more often than not, you'll just lose. And you'll realize that if you just try and you put those cards on the stack, that you'll get there.
Yeah, that brings up 2 important points and kind of like stories. One was like I talked to Joey after he won Breach the Bay, and that video's on the channel from a couple months back. Really cool conversation. But Logan was in that pod too, and Joey was like, "Hey, is there like a reason for me not to cast this Nas right now?" And Logan's like, "I have 2 pieces. I'm not going to show you what they are so you can play around it, but just know if you like cast a Nas, you're getting dunked on." But then Joey top decks voice. He's like, "That seems unlikely now." And so, Joey slams voice, and calling the weak Nas wins the game from there. But exactly like you said, just because people are representing or presenting this idea of having interaction doesn't mean necessarily applies to you in any meaningful way. Yeah. And then the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking through that, and the kind of this flow of, I love that idea. I've never heard it described in that way, but I think that's a really like important concept. Yeah. And not even just for this deck, just like a CEDH in general, it's an important concept. But what I like to joke about, and it's only sort of a joke, is we're playing Psychology 101, the Magic format. Like if you understand human behavior and like how people represent themselves in social situations, you get so much free information.
Well, I say that all the time in the Discord, in that if you're good enough at this format and you're good enough at reading people, you can have perfect hand information on your opponents all the time. It is really difficult to do, but it is totally possible. And the thing I was also talking about, and the reason I was talking about this with my wife last night, was that we're both psychology majors.
Oh, sick.
So I was talking about, I was like, one of the key things that I do in my games, and one of the things that was mentioned a lot to me after the game, after my top 16 game at the Albuquerque 10K, was that both my teammate Andre and Sam Black were saying that the thing I did very well in the game, and the reason I was able to last in it so long, was that I was purposely manipulating the flow of power in the game to make the Nagila player in our pod look scarier than me, where I was purposefully not denying them resources, giving them advantage to keep them one step ahead of me, so that both Sam and Andre had to focus on dealing with them and couldn't dedicate all of their resources to stopping me, allowing me to push. So once you start understanding that flow of power and like observe it consciously, you're also able to kind of manipulate it in a way that makes people scarier than you, which is also really important for getting your windows, because this deck wins second like no other deck. If somebody spends their Force of Will, that's usually my sign to go. Like that's the thing. If you can also with talking, if you can get people to fight over things that don't really matter to you, it opens your window like crazy, because there's only so many things that can stop you. Like if like for some reason someone spends their Force of Will on somebody's heuristic study or something like that, and they decide to fight over it, it's just like, okay,
it's so free, please.
Window's wide open. You guys just spent Force and Fierce going into my turn before my turn. Let's rip it.
Dude, that was the so I lost my winning in at the Boil, and granted I was on farm, but I think it's worth talking about because of this flow of power idea. Someone, C1 had git probed me, and I unfortunately had the literal nuts Like I had everything, and they had onboard Ska, Crom, Esper, Fairy. Like they also were in a very good position. But because of the ability to put so much pressure on the known information about what I was going to be doing on my turn, it opened up their window wide open to get everyone to focus on me. And then once that was all spent, like they were free to go. And so if you can understand those concepts, you can go really, really far. And I think that's really important. This is going to sound like not helpful to people. But I've joked before on the podcast, and Thor is going to love that I'm saying this now, that I'm like a little bit of a woo-woo star bitch. There's this, like, you can feel it. I don't know how to describe it, but if you're really paying attention, there's like a gut instinct to when your most likely window is. At least for me. Like I can kind of grok that based on what's been happening. And I know that when I trust that, the games go much better for me than when I resist that.
Yeah, I think that ties really into what I was saying, where people subconsciously follow this flow of power. Like you kind of subconsciously understand when things are settling, when things are moving in certain directions, when certain plays have shifted people into the lead, when certain plays have moved people to being way far behind. And that also ties into like sometimes you feel like you have it, but that's just your gut telling you and your knowledge of Magic telling you, hey, people have tapped out or used these certain resources in a way that suggests that the likelihood of me winning here is a lot higher. So like if you can kind of draw that out to be like more consciously pay attention to that, it becomes a lot more obvious when these windows present themselves. And on top of that, I was going to say, you kind of just there's a beyond that, and beyond having to like always pay attention to what your opponents are doing outside of the game and trying to read them, because that can be really difficult, especially when you're playing a complicated non-blue deck where like a lot of your brain power is going to be dedicated to remembering your lines, figuring out your lines. Sometimes just making them have it is the way to go.
Yeah.
As a good example, in my top 6, or my winning in at the 10K, I was in a pod where I was the only one who couldn't draw, basically. Everybody had said, yeah, we want to draw this game, just draw into top 16. And I was like, I don't make it, I have to play. So they pretty much agreed, yeah, we're playing for a draw. They wanted to just stop me altogether. But I was like, okay, that's fine. I just have to play. Like, it is what it is. I'm just going to try to make you guys have it. I opened up my hand and I looked at a turn 2 win. And I was like, well, I just got to send it, I guess. Like, they're all probably going to keep Force of Wills and stuff like that. But as I played out my turn, it came around, and one of the players in the game was Max P, and I went to activate a Wishclaw Talisman on my turn 2 to tutor for a piece. And both the Log Brass player in front of me and Max P, who was on Team D, looked at me and they said, "Don't do it." And I was like, "Why not?" And they're like, "We guarantee you that we stop you here." And Max P had just gone Lamb Dork on his turn, and kind of the way he was positioning me, I was like, I don't think he's telling me the truth. I think he's bluffing interaction 100%. I was like, I think what the Rogdrass player had done on their turn was very interesting on their turn 1. They had a crazy start where they got Rogdrass, Cradle, and then they Sylvan Scryinged all on their turn 1. And I was like, okay, right, if they think they're playing to win, right, if they all of a sudden got greedy, they go get a different land. They go get Talon Gates, whatever it may be. What they ended up revealing to me was an Otawara. So they were really playing for a draw. And I was like, if they're tapping out for an Otawara here, and I've played a birdie on my turn 1, it really suggests to me that they already have something for me. And they want another thing for their next turn if we get there. So I was like, I think they have something. So I take back the Wishclaw activation because they tell me to stop, and I look at the Rogdrass player and I just say, "You want to show me something that encourages me not to push here?" And the other thing, and this is a really outside of the game thing that you can really take advantage of, is that we're all human. People get tired, people make misplays, people get confused. It all works to your advantage, where they weren't talking to each other about what interaction they had, even though they were all playing for a draw. They kind of all just assumed that they were working in each other's best interests. But everyone at the end of the day still kind of wants to win the game, right? So they just weren't talking to each other. It was the end of the day. The Rogdrass player hadn't eaten anything on that day, so he just flashes me a Force of Will. No deal, no nothing. He just shows it to me. So I'm like, okay, well, I have to hope that he gets greedy. That's my hit.
Yeah.
I have to hope he gets greedy and wants to hit specifically the win and not anything before that with this Force of Will. I don't know what else he has.
Yeah.
He didn't show me the blue card, but I kind of assumed that he had it because he was holding a full grip.
Yeah.
So what I did was I was like, okay, well, we're in the make him have it zone. Here is a Imperial recruiter into an open Force of Will, and he just goes resolves. And I say, awesome. And I go fetch a Hexing Squelcher, and then I just jam a Smoker, and he goes, we're dead, huh?
Shit.
Yeah. And I go, yep. And then the crazy thing was that Max was like, I knew that's exactly what he was going to get with the Imperial recruiter. And then the Rakdos player is just like, why didn't you say anything? I didn't know. So there's this whole thing where it's like, everyone's human. People make mistakes. People get tired.
Yep.
There's a lot of stress on people, especially in tournaments, where it's just like sometimes just doing a lot of things and trying to make people have it in many ways ends up to where they're too late. They get greedy and they're just too late to interact, where it just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to, like, I think one of my favorite things about this deck is you don't have the option really of playing passively. Like, and I think that's something that people get really comfortable on, especially like any of the Ristic slot piles. Like, I don't know, I'm going to draw like 20 cards. It's probably fine. I'll win someday. And this deck, I think, really rewards proactive decision making. And I think that's a really powerful skill to acquire as a player and to lean into. And that's one of the reasons that I'm really enjoying it. I think we could spend like the rest of forever talking about this. However, I want to move on to mulligans and stuff.
I want to give one last point very quickly on windows. We've talked about how to identify an early window in that you're just looking at what's played, hands, lands, that kind of stuff, mana represented, trying to figure out what kind of interaction actually stops you and if you can play around it. And sometimes you can't, and you just got to make them have it. And sometimes they don't have it. And more often than not, if it's early enough, they don't have it. But beyond this early window finding, this opening your window section that I put in there exists because sometimes the window doesn't present itself. And the one thing this deck does very well is just breaks the window open. It says, if you're not going to open the window, I'm just going to break it down. And you can just put these silences on the stack, like Hope of Gear for silence somebody, win because the person who you thought had interaction is silenced. Try to go for a win, doesn't work. Final Fortune, they don't have they spent all their interaction on the win. Now you can just Final Fortune, put another win on the stack. Put a Grand Abolisher, a Ranger Captain, just all of these different things that the deck has available to it to just jam a win straight through that closed window and just forcibly open it.
100%. Yeah, and that's like, we haven't talked about it, but that's one of the reasons that like Pyre of Heroes is in the deck, because it's so easy to like, we're playing human tribal basically, and your 1-drop humans convert into GAs, your Tymna converts into Myrel if you're playing Myrel. Like there are just so many ways to, I don't think they can stop this, I'm going to create my window.
Yeah, we can go over that more in the flex slots and variations, because I have Pyre of Heroes in the considering board where we'll look at then. But yeah, we can move on to a little bit of mulligans and opening hands and kind of what to look for in this deck. Yeah,
so you had put together, do you want to talk about the examples that you put together?
Yeah, so I put together 2 very crazy examples of that can work. And obviously these are like the gold standard hands.
Oh, this hand is nuts, bro.
Yeah, exactly. I put together super nuts hands to show off a turbo hand and a Tymna hand, and just what is the pinnacle of what is possible in this deck. And these both come from my list, my Tymna-centric list. So this shows you that like both things are completely possible, despite how much you index into one side or the other. So this hand that we're looking at is, for those who can't tell, and obviously some people don't know the Dargo math, this is a turn 1 turbo hand wind. So we have a very fun card called Prize Statue in this hand, and this card is probably the most tutored for non-creature spell of any card. Throughout all players. It seems very bad at its base value. It's 2 mana. It's a 2 mana artifact that says when Prize Statue enters the battlefield or is put into the graveyard, make a treasure. I guess I can just play this out to kind of give you an example of how this would work. So what you're able to do is turn 1. We don't even need a draw card for turn here. This is just, you just need 5 cards.
Yeah, just over.
This hand just needs 5 cards to win. Yeah. So what you do is you're able to play Ancient Tomb to cast your Prize Statue. When Prize Statue enters, it'll make you a treasure. So now you have another mana, but notably you have 2 artifacts to sacrifice. Then you're able to cast Memnite. as a third artifact.
Yep.
So then what you're able to do is sack that treasure for red mana, which will discount Dargo by 2 already. So like we had said, that magic number 3 is what you need to get to cost 1 mana. You float this 1 red mana, and then you cast Dargo, sacrificing Prize Statue and Memnite as an additional cost. So there's your 3 sacrifices. Dargo costed the 1 mana that you floated off the treasure. Now you'll have Prize Statue trigger. The Prize Statue will make you a treasure. And so now you all of a sudden have Dargo and a mana up. We have this very fun card in the hand called Sacrifice. When you cast Sacrifice, you can sacrifice Dargo as an additional cost to make 7 mana. We have another card in our hand that costs 7 mana, Peer into the Abyss. So then we're able to cast Peer into the Abyss, target ourselves, draw half our deck. From there, you can put together a win from any of your lines. Notably, this hand also, like I said, I put together 5 cards and then just drew the extra 2 cards, and it just happened to be land Wishclaw Talisman. So notably, you just need 3 mana to find the win after that. Like any mana free rocks, rituals, anything wins you the game. God Happy Deck just get you there. So this is like the pinnacle of Turbo Hand.
Yeah, and this is like one of those hands that you dream about having, but they're also like turn 1 and turn 2 wins are not that uncommon, even on like a more mid-range focused list, because you have this stupid guy who makes 7 mana for no reason.
Yeah.
And it's just really easy to convert that into a win from there.
And I did want to say that the point you made here was very important, and it was almost like a roadblock for me when I first picked up the deck, in that turn 1 wins, not as common, but they can show up. Turn 2 wins are pretty common. Turn 3 wins are very common. The thing that I focused in on the deck was like, oh, I have a turn 2 win. I should send it. I should try to send this. And then I would just lose, because it was like, oh, well, I didn't like look for interaction. I didn't like read the flow of power or anything. I was just sending the win. And then it just got stopped, or I wasn't trying to do it protected or anything. And the real level up moment for me in this deck, and the time that my win rate really skyrocketed and I started seeing success on the deck, was realizing that these are common. You do not need to send them when you see them. It is more important to, and that's why I love the Tymna plan, because I get to just develop into Tymna while I have these combos in hand and wait for that window, or wait till I draw enough cards to where I can break that window open while I'm still holding these combos, where it's just like, cool. It's not always right to send them. A lot of the time it is more correct to just wait and develop more resources, so that you either send them in a more secure and protected way, or you get to just capitalize on a window when it presents it.
Yeah, because even if you hold this hand and you slow roll it, and like you could still turn 2 Tymna with 3 artifacts on board, or turn 2 Wishclaw with the ability to go tutor protection for the Peer on the turn 3. Like there's so many things you can do with this hand that aren't sending it on turn 1. But if I have a turn 1 hand, I'm sending the shit out of it.
I'm sending a turn 1 if I see a turn 1.
Yeah, but more just to like illustrate the point of like the deck is so flexible in that manner that just because you see it doesn't mean you have to send it. Like you can kind of tailor that ability to move a little bit later in the game, but do so more responsibly, or when you think there's going to be a window open. And yeah, this hand is grand. And then I know you would put together like a little, I think this is more of like the Tymna centric plan.
Yeah,
right.
So this is the Tymna hand of my dreams. Like I wish I could see this hand always. Kind of like I've used Memnite in both of these because it's like the hot new thing for our deck that we're testing.
It's so good.
And I wanted to highlight how it very much synergizes with a turbo plan and with a grind plan, which makes it really good in this list. So this is, and then I also wanted to highlight our boy TOODEEP, my favorite card. So this hand is an amazing Tymna hand that only pretty much exists because of TOODEEP. What you're able to do with this hand is, again, this was just a 5-card hand, and I drew 2 random cards, happened to be land Altar of Dementia. Altar of Dementia makes this hand exponentially better because we have half of a combo, which means that this hand very easily converts into possibly a turn 2 win, maybe a turn 3 win, and you still have a ton of Tymna value. So what you can do with this hand is you play your Mana Confluence out, you cast TOODEEP, you get a Scry to you, which lets you set up your draw. I have this open. I'll look at the top 2 cards of the deck that I have this open with to see where we go. I've scryed 2 lands. I would put those both on bottom. I don't really need a land. So then we're able to follow that up with a Lotus Petal into a Dark Ritual. And this sets off alarm bells in everyone's mind. People are going to want to counter this. The amazing thing about being on the Tymna plan is 99% of the time, if I'm doing early Dark Ritual, it's because I want an early Tymna. And people are so willing to let you have a Dark Ritual into an early Tymna.
100%. Yeah.
It's crazy because everyone's expecting the worst. And then you tell them, no, it's just a Tymna. And they're like, oh, okay, that's fine. It's like,
Yeah, it's
oh,
fine.
not really, but sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So you get to cast Dark Ritual, and then we have the ability on Mardu Devotee that lets you filter mana once a turn. So off of Dark Ritual, you can filter one of the black into a white to cast your Tymna off of this Dark Ritual. So then you're able to cast out Tymna, and then you're also able to cast out Memnite. So effectively, we would go into turn 2, scrying 2 cards, also having 3 Tymna attacks for turn 2. So and having a combo piece in hand and a land for the next turn. So let's say I scribed my 2 lands to the bottom. If I were to go to my next turn, I would draw a Lotho, I would attack and get a silence, a land, and a prized statue. So we didn't get to the crazy turn 2 win, but like it's still super developed, right? I've gotten my 3 attacks and I have a Lotho in hand. I can deploy out this Lotho and still hold up a silence for interaction for turn 3.
Yeah.
Like the hand is crazy. And it highlights like what Tymna can actually do in this list. But I will say that beyond like a crazy hand like this, I am totally willing to keep a 1-drop creature and a turn 2 Tymna. Like turn 1 1-drop, turn 2 Tymna.
Absolutely.
Where we'll see where it goes from there. We play such a high density of combos that like just these couple draws off of Tymna is usually enough to get you there.
Yeah, and that's something that I try to explain to people a lot with the deck is when they're talking about Mulligan specifically and they're asking about like things that you're looking for or specific hands or specific targets or whatever. And I really kind of lean on what the hand is showing me, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's like the deck is so flexible. It's kind of like Farm in that way, where there's so many different directions that each hand could take you. And I think there's like, the more willing you are to kind of accept what the deck is showing you it wants to do, will lend itself towards a better performance than you like death mulling for Necro or whatever like specific target card that you might be looking for otherwise.
Yeah, so I guess beyond these specific hands, what are archetypal hands you're looking for? Like just like a big picture hand that you would keep.
Yeah, so I will keep anything that's like turn 1 Dwarf, turn 2 Tymna. I keep almost every time. I value the mana axis a little bit more than the card axis a lot of the time. So like if I have an early Lotho, I tend to prefer that over like one of the other early value engines or early PFB. I'll keep a like land dork culling Nas, obviously, like for a turbo hand. Like there's kind of these like signpost cards that make hands really keepable for me. And then like you said in the like we had Altar of Dementia here, if I have something that's like grind plan plus half of a combo all day long, twice on Sunday, and then if I just have like tutor density and lands, I think is also like a very keepable hand. Those hands I think are really hard to navigate because they're so flexible and like what you tutor for is going to vary a lot. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm like totally okay keeping, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but it's all kind of fine.
Yeah. Let's say for me, I'm kind of in the same spot. My average mulligan is 6 in this deck, which I don't think is very common, but leaning more into the Tymna hand plan is a lot more hands are very playable in that I like if I see 2 dark turn 1 Tymna, that's a snap keep. I don't care what else is in my hand. Usually I will also just keep a dork turn 2 Tymna full stop. Like I don't really care what else is in the hand. Just because I like how my deck is set up and how most of our decks are set up is that like that can very easily pivot into a turn 3, turn 4 win. But I think I wanted to more cover that personally. I also keep mana a lot of the times as like if I were to highlight a signpost card over draw effects.
Yep.
And I think this is kind of a trap when people start playing the deck. And one thing I fell into when I started was it's very tempting to keep these very flashy cards in your hand, in your starting hand, because you're like, oh, I can get into it. I can find the sacrifice. I can find the burnt offering and get this Ballistic Citadel down super early. Real fact of the matter is that we play a higher combo density than we play a ritual density. It's very easy to combo off with Dargo, whether that be an actual combo or a match draw effect.
Yep.
But the thing is that we play less mana that gets us there. So I like to look at my hand in a way of what draws am I open to? What draws is this open to winning the game? Because right, if I have a dork, a Tymna for turn 1, turn 2, maybe an artifact, a rock, whatever it may be, right? I'm looking at like, okay, well, this is like, if I get to turn 3, this can be a turn 3 Dargo on the board with some mana.
Yep.
Now, if I have a Peer into the Abyss in my hand, well, it's like, okay, well, in order to convert this on turn 3, what would I have to draw into? Well, I would have to draw into specifically Sacrifice or Burnt Offering. There's really not much many other combinations that get me there on turn 3, unless I just happen to rip like a Dark Ritual and a Cabal Ritual or a Cold in the Week on top of that. So it's like a lot of combinations of cards, which is very unlikely. But the thing is like, okay, well, what if this what if this Peer into the Abyss was instead a Burnt Offering? Well, you might be tempted to kind of pitch that hand away because it's like, well, this Burnt Offering doesn't really do me anything with this hand. This hand is just a bunch of really cheap cards, 1 drops, 0 drops, 2 drops, and then a Burnt Offering. And it's like, okay, well, I don't need this Burnt Offering for anything in my hand. But the thing is that it's one of our more powerful effects, and it opens you to a myriad of draws. If you draw into any single of your mass draw effects, now you can cast it. If you draw into any of your combo pieces or multiple pieces of your combo pieces, usually it's enough mana to put them together. Now it also opens you up to a tutor into a mass draw effect or a tutor into a combo piece. So it's like, that's what Jordan was saying is like, it's a lot more important to get mana in this deck than it is to get these combo pieces or these draw effects, even though it's really tempting to keep the combo and the draw effects. We play more of them, and the mana helps you convert into them a lot faster. And the other thing is that people discount a lot of the time is that mana, in the same way with Thrasios, in this deck, mana equals cards. You have Tymna. You have Tymna attackers. That mana, putting resources on the board, is card draw.
Completely agree. Yeah, and I think that's something that I've started to value in almost all decks that I play, is the mana axis a little bit more than the card axis, but this one in particular, I think that has like proven itself to be really valuable to me. And one other kind of signpost card for me, because I value Breach so highly, is I'm really, really high on Stitcher Supplier in the sense that like turn 1 Stitchers, turn 2 Tymna with like a Breach in hand, is one of my favorite hands. It also has this weird effect. So many of our Tymna attackers, this is kind of like not psychology, I don't know how to describe it, but like so many of our Tymna attackers do good things for us when they die. And so it creates this weird like psychology in your opponents where they won't block things because they're more worried about the death effects than giving you the card. And you don't care either way a lot of the time. And so when people are like, oh man, I don't know, I don't have any open Tymna attackers in this board state, it's like, actually you might. And maybe you also don't even care if it dies. Like you might as well try. And I think that's something that's interesting.
I think this pivots really well into our next topic, matchups and politics. And I also want to talk about this because it's one of the big pushbacks I get in the Discord about being a Tymna-centric player and advocating for this plan is that a lot of people are like, well, you must not play in a Thrasios or Kinnan meta where they put a ton of creatures out and stuff like that. I'm like, well, actually, I'm from New Mexico, and this is the home of
the land of Freedom Waffle.
Freedom Waffle Pierce, and we have a lot of Kinnans around here. Just because, he made the deck popular, we saw it a lot, saw it was powerful, people wanted to play it. But we also have a ton of Thrasios here. People love Rock Thras, people love Yoshi Thras. Now I have a TNT that just showed up, and so I play against a ton of creature decks. My most common matchup is actually Kinnan, historically through in recording. And the thing that people don't realize is that, well, one, you said, a lot of the time, whether the creatures die or not, it's getting you a beneficial effect. And it's the reason we choose the 1-drops that we do. We want to maximize the value of these cards for both the Tymna plan and the Dargo plan. So if you're sacrificing them, you want value. If they're not being sacrificed, you want value. We want to maximize the efficiency of these card slots. So you can just attack into these boards. And I do it all the time where I attack into a board of creatures. And it's just like, well, you could kill it. You lose your resources, though. And I still get resources out of it. So you could also just let it through.
And people underestimate the greed of CDH players is unparalleled, bro.
People will not.
They're not going to block your, like, okay. I shouldn't say definitively because someone's going to be in the comments of like, well, I attacked and they blocked me with their Land of Elves. But the vast majority of the time, people are not going to time walk themselves to try to time walk you. because we're all trying to win the game, and it's just not worth it a lot of the time.
I mean, and the other thing about that is like, if I'm attacking into a Kinnan who has Kinnan, like I do this all the time. Kinnan will never trade Kinnan. That full stop. I don't like. I've heard this a few times, and I don't know where people get it. You can send a Tymna into a Kinnan. They will not block. They will never block. But if you send like one of your 1/1s into the Kinnan with, and this is one of the reasons I love Shambling Gas, because it has the option to die and give someone a -1/-1 So it's like, okay, they have Kinnan and a Dork, and you can send into them, and I guarantee you they're not going to want to trade their Llanowar Elves. And even if they do, it's kind of beneficial to you, because you still will be able to get a treasure out of it, and they'll go down 2 mana. They've effectively time locked themselves, and you've still gotten value. But if they try to block with their Kinnan, it's like, oh, well, I can just put a -1/-1 counter on it, and your Kinnan will die.
And now it's dead.
So a lot of the time, they're not even willing to block. I remember when I was talking to, I have one of my teammates used to play a lot of Dargo pre-ban, and they loved Signature Supplier as well. But also because they're like, if they know your deck, this card effectively has Death Touch. No one wants to put 3 more cards in your graveyard.
Nope.
It's like a lot of people don't want to give you value. And the thing is like you said, CEDH players are greedy beyond belief. And that applies even more to green players, in my experience.
Oh, 100%.
They do not want to reduce their cradle count. They don't want to lose mana. Nothing. I will attack into clogged boards all of the time if they have to trade. If it means they have to trade, usually you have an open attack.
Almost always. And like sometimes you're going to get got by that, but I would much rather, like, because even then, I think that my ability to bounce back from those situations is very high in the deck. And sometimes that reduced cradle count or reduced mana or whatever is something that they were like really banking on for their game plan. And so I don't know. I tend not to worry about it. If I get blocked, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. But one matchup that we've been talking about incessantly in the Discord is the Rhystic Slop piles.
Yeah.
Because we do have this thing where our only way to win for most lists is I'm going to cast my commander 7 billion times. So how are you approaching like the Rhystic Slop, kind of Rogish Eyes of the world and all that stuff?
So I'm going to pull up about one of the things I had said about the Albuquerque 10K, because that was really at like the precipice of like the start of the Rhystic Slop. It had just kind of shown up, it had done well, so a lot of people showed up with it because it was like new hot deck. But I think while I'm looking for that, I'll just say that there's been a lot of like doomer mentality around this in our deck. Understandably so, it can be a more difficult matchup, especially for the more turbo-centric versions of this deck, where it's like and it's totally fair. A lot of people want to come to this deck and they just want to jam their head off, and that's okay. Like that's the non-blue playstyle sometimes. Sometimes you just want to jam, and you don't want to be the mid-range deck in non-blue because you don't like that. It's like, well, if I'm mid-ranging, I'd rather be in blue. Like I want to play this deck because I can jam. That's totally fair. But I think there's more nuance to this deck in that even if you are focused on a faster game plan, you can still grind. In my opinion, our deck is actually super well positioned into these slop games because we're still looking. Let's see. I've found what I said about it right here. My exact words were playing into the slop type of meta for the first time. My overall thoughts is that it feels like the window has shifted from early turn 1 to turn 2 to turn 3 and turn 4. A lot of people are playing a lot more free interaction. A lot of people are leaning heavily on Rog to turn on this free interaction. So it means it's all there from turn 1. But the thing is that they're using this interaction to get themselves to turn 3, where they can then, right, they've stuffed the turbo player. Now they can develop into a value engine like a Rhystic Study, and then hope that they draw into their interaction on the turn cycle. Or realistically, the optimal play pattern for them is that they've stopped the early win. Now no one's going to be trying for it, so they don't have to worry about interaction, so they can develop into their value engines. And then by the time it gets to people are trying to win again, they have enough resources. So that turn 1, turn 2 window isn't very open. So I said it's really shifted to turn 3, turn 4. They're loading up on more interaction and backing up their early turns with ROG, so jamming a Grand Abolisher or a similar effect into play on turn 3 or turn 4 when they tap low into their advantage engines is actually the best spot for us. It's where it's like, okay, they've used their early interaction to stop the other turbo player. Now what? Turn 3, they tap into their draw engine. They've used their interaction. Well, here's your Grand Abolisher. Do you have a force of will?
Yep.
Do you have a subtlety? Do you have a disrupting
Yep.
shoal? No? Cool. There's a win.
Yeah, I win. Yep. Yeah, I won a game last night into 2 Rhystic Studies into Fish because I had one of my other favorite hands in the deck is turn 1 Voice, turn 2 Tymna, because it's so easy to be like, it's just the world's best Tymna attacker, bro.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like you don't have to worry about it. But it was Voice, Tymna, something that made treasures, and then I slam a Citadel, and I'm like, it's not getting better for me. If you draw Otawara, you draw Otawara, like whatever. But like 3 spells in, my Citadel cast is Vamp. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to Vamp a Ranger to the top. So even if you draw Otawara, you're Omega cooked. There's no way out of this for you. So they have like 50 cards in hand. I have double silence. And I'm like, here's a wheel with a Bowmasters out. You guys die now. But it was that turn 3 window where they just didn't have an answer for Voice Victory and they didn't have a way to remove it. And I think that like I'm really valuing that like turn 2, turn 3 silence effect is still unbelievably powerful, even in the slot games.
Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, they always have it, or oh, they have a bounce spell now. And it's just a matter of like, you got to think about it objectively. A lot of these decks, over the normal interaction that existed for Grand Abolisher and these silence effects, right? Like, because before we always were like, Grand Abolisher is effectively uncounterable. Like, no, like Force of Will or bust, right? Well, and people are like, well, they're playing so much more for it now. And it's like, kind of, but not really. Like, some of them are on subtlety, not all of them. And then they're all on Disrupting Shoal now. So what? They're on +2 pieces, maybe +1 in a 98 card deck or a 99 card deck. It's like the chances of it actually happening aren't that much higher than it was before. It's slightly higher, but realistically, most of the time, Grand Abolisher turn 3, turn 4 is just as uncounterable as it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to sound trite, but my response to a lot of this is like, I don't know, bro, don't be scared. Like, if they stop you, they stop you. They were going to stop you anyway. And the likelihood of them having that answer is not, it's exactly what you said earlier. The interaction they have rarely lines up the way that they think it does, or you're afraid that it does. And if you just try, like, you'll be really surprised at what happens.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I super highly value in this deck the fact that Grand Abolisher, I consider it a win. Like, Grand Abolisher is a win. You put it on the stack, and that is a win attempt right there. 99% of the time. But the thing is like, it's a win attempt that is no dust off your back if it gets stopped. It's like, cool, you just have to invest your most powerful interaction on this Grand Abolisher, and I am now left with a board of Tymna attackers, Tymna, and maybe Dargo, who is also the world's best Tymna attacker. Maybe more value pieces. It's like, cool, I will pass the turn, and then next turn I will try again.
Yeah, that's something that I talked to a lot of people about. Nick in the Discord is another one of our locals who does really well on the deck. And he was someone who helped me a ton. So shouts to Nick. But like, I'll be in situations where I just think to myself, what would Nick do? And I've watched Nick send some crazy shit, but he's just like willing to try stuff. And that's something that I've like really pushed myself towards being willing to do in the deck. And it's helped me a lot. I also view Grand Abolisher as a win attempt. And what I was meant to bring up at the start of this, though, was like, you can't let people hold interaction over your head the whole game.
Yes. I hate to see this, and I hate when people do this. It's just that people get so scared to push into known interaction. But the thing is, like, your situation will never get better. Nope. If you've put yourself in a situation where you were going to push and somebody revealed an interaction that can stop your push, now the whole table both knows the interaction that they have and the push that you have. So you might think, oh, I'll just wait until they're forced to use the interaction so that I can just then push my win. That's not going to happen. Everybody knows their interaction. They're going to play around it or not force them to use it so that they can always hold it over your head. And you will never have a window. Sometimes the right play, and you see this in 1v1 Magic all the time, so it's like, it's very strange that we don't see it in CEDH. Sometimes the right play is just force them to use the interaction. Like, you need to get that Force of Will out of their hand. I remember one of the pivotal points in my top 16 game that took it to the draw, and I mean that gave it to Andre, but like it is what it is,
Yeah.
was that we knew that Sam Black on Rogishai had a silence in their hand, and that they were also
Yeah.
setting up on a good board. And it was like, oh,
Yeah.
we lose this if they get into their turn with a silence.
Yep.
So I just jammed win attempts, knowing that
Yep.
I wasn't going to get there because there was a silence, but I was like, I know that we can't let them have silence. One, they
Yep.
win the game if they have it. Two, if they get politicked into not winning the game on that turn, I never win. I never
Yeah.
win through a silence. I was like, I need to
Yep.
jam the things that make him use his silence on my turn. And it kind of sucks,
Yep.
but the thing is, like, you kind of have to look forward. And
Yep.
like the projection of not making them use it and being scared is your window's never there. It will never be open again.
Yep.
And while making them use it might lose you the game on someone else's turn because they didn't have the interaction, you were going to lose the game anyway.
Yeah, you couldn't win that game. Yeah. Yeah, that's another like weird favorite thing of mine to do is I'll cast a Deadpool into a Ranger Captain, and there is also something else on board that I'm like very fine with having. And they'll be like, do I need to practice Ranger Captain right now? I'm like, I don't know, bro. Do you? Because if they don't, now I have it, and I don't care. And if they do, cool, I'm not getting silenced again on my next turn.
Yep.
And they also don't have the Ranger Captain to protect their turn. So like, meh. And you kind of have to be willing to engage. Like, people joke about calling it terrorist politics, and it's not quite that intense, but you do have to be willing to be like, I'm going to throw a wrench in this game and see what happens.
Well, too, I was gonna say that, especially in these slot games where I was still talking about, is like that again,
Yeah.
flying back to that flow of power idea, where it's like there is a lot of value in manipulating the flow of power if you're able to do it. I have many times cast a piece of interaction to allow somebody else to pop off. Like purposely allow somebody else to unlock somebody else in order to force everybody else to use interaction on them so that I can run later. Where it's like, there's these very strange things that you have to do in order to try to find your window. But like, it's also important to understand that unlike in a blue deck where you kind of can just ball up with your interaction, stop people from winning, and then get to your turn with more interaction in hand to protect your win, you don't really have that option. And like, you kind of just have to get people to use their resources. And if that means you have to take a gamble on unlocking a player and hoping your opponents have enough interaction to stop them, then that's what that means.
Yep. Dude, I had a game where it was double slop, and then me and I don't remember the other deck at the pod, but I fought like tooth and nail for the other slot player to keep their tithe, because I'm like, if your tithe gets stuffed and they have draw engine tithes, I'm never winning this game because they're winning at 100% of the time, no questions asked. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
So like, I'm gonna spend pieces so that they have to spend pieces, and you still get a tithe at the end of this. And then like, am I winning that game? Probably not. But it's at least a probably, not a definitively we are dead on that player's turn.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like we are playing very powerful decks all around, and you got to be open. And this is something that'll come up in the slot games, is the discussion about draws. You have to be open to just not taking a draw. It's like, unless somebody shows you a win or a definitive king-making situation, it's not in your interest to draw ever in this deck. You play so many pieces that is just like one card away from winning you the game, that if you have a sliver of a chance of seeing a card on your turn, if you get there, you should take it. You should take that sliver of a chance every single time. Because it's 100%. Just like, you the odds that you get there are a lot higher than you think. And you should be playing on these 1% chances 100% of the time.
That's one of my favorite things about this deck is I played TNT for a long time. I played Farm for a long time. And there'd be so many situations where I'm like, I've drawn 20 cards. I physically can't win the game. Like, I would love to. I would love nothing more than to win this game right now. And I have 7 dorks in my hand and they all do nothing. This deck provides so many ways to find a win. And I think that navigating that space and like knowing that you're going to draw gas, or at least you're highly likely to draw gas, is awesome. It's one of my favorite things.
Okay, I wanted to. So we've touched on the slop matchup, and I think it was important for us to do so in depth, because that's what's in the meta right now, and it's what's in the zeitgeist of everyone right now. I will say that I think our worst matchup is a bunch of other turbo decks.
Oh, I completely agree.
We are a fast deck. We are not the fastest deck. I think Turbo is what people think we are. I think that's not correct. I think we are more aggressive mid-range than we are Turbo, or fast mid-range, whatever you want to call it. But we are more on the mid-range side of things than we are on the Turbo side of things. Ral and Rogsai will always go faster than you. If you're in a pod where you have 2 Turbo decks going before you, that is the worst thing you can see in this deck. Because a lot of the time, you're just not, like, you're not going to be fast enough to beat them. And then there's not enough interaction at the table to stop them. And the thing is like, you may be tempted. We have pieces that can stop them. Silences, Vexing Baubles, all of that stuff. And you might be tempted to keep a hand with those in there because you're like, oh, I can stop them and then maybe win. But my best advice for those matchups is mulligan down low as you can for the fastest win you can see. You just have to 100%. Hope that you get there before they do.
Yep, I completely agree. There's no amount of playing police in those pods that we're even like capable of doing that's going to be a higher EV play than you find a hand that wins faster than they do.
Yeah. I tried it. Yeah. I even tried organizing with the other mid-range player at the deck at the table to try to stop people at the 10K. Not enough.
You can't.
It's just you can't. You're just not doing it. You just have to, even if you're mulling down to 4-3, just look for that fast hand.
Yep. Well, because that's the thing is like the likelihood that, how do I describe this? They're not stopping you either.
Yeah.
It is kind of an arms race to a certain extent. And there are hands in this deck that let you win those spots, but I don't play those games passively.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, when you get into like the mid-range games and you're up against like not slop decks, but mid-range decks, you're like, okay, well, I can kind of keep a fast hand, but I want protection for this hand to make it more likely to win. So your matchup, and I will say that I think the matchup into mid-range and slop is really good for us for those very reasons, right? We have ways to break through really late with just a mass amount of wins. And in the mid-range games, you can kind of just, in the slop games, there's also those windows that present themselves naturally for grand abolishers and stuff. But in those mid-range games, there's like a lot of play all around the turns where it's like they're not as loaded up with free interaction. So like you can ram an abolisher at certain times. Sometimes a window just opens to just raw win the game without protection. But the thing is like once you get into those turbo games, the benefit to us is that all of a sudden you don't have to look for a protection piece to protect your win.
Yeah,
if you see a raw win, like we were saying, like turn 2, turn 3 wins are very common, but you don't send them when you can because you kind of want interaction. You can take that last part of the statement off in a turbo game. You send them when you see them because the odds they have interaction are even lower.
Yep, completely agree.
So, and like I said, with the mid-range, we have a good matchup. I think, and one of the reasons I take this deck, and it's my favorite deck, and I take it to all tournaments, is like it is the only deck I have ever played in CEDH where I don't feel like I've lost the game when I sit down at a table and see a certain pairing of decks at the table, where it's like, I used to be a CISA player and I've played farm in tournaments as well and stuff like that. And there were some matchups where I would sit down in seat 4, see 3 other decks and just be like, I lost. There's no mulligans I can beat you.
Nothing I can do.
Win you the game at all. So cool. That's awesome. I love that for me in this tournament.
Yeah. Glad I get to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't ever, the only time I've ever felt like it was an unwinnable game, and it actually turned out to still be winnable, and that's one of the other things I love about the deck, but I've felt like it was unwinnable when it was a double stack spot.
Oh, true.
Because there was like 3 rule of laws and just like random bullshit, and I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
But the likelihood of when you're playing into like largely meta compositions, no game is unwinnable, and that's something I really value.
Yeah, because it's like I said, if you sit down in a turbo pod, it's like, cool. You have the option for mulligan for a fast win. Like, and you can just put it on, sometimes you can just put it on the win stat faster than they do. Whereas some decks don't have the option to mulligan for something like that. If you're playing into a slot game, you can mulligan to a hand that just grinds really hard and jams an abolisher when it needs to and win those games. And even into the stacks matchup, we're not that bad. Like I said, the only thing that stops this deck, stacks-wise, pretty much only things unless you're playing into like super really weird niche stacks pieces that don't normally see play, is Dranith and Rule of Law. Godpharaoh Statue, Damping Sphere, all of these other big effects that people can't win through, we can still win through them.
Yep. Which is really valuable. And one of the most difficult part about playing stacks is picking the right stacks piece for the right time. And it's very difficult to do that for our deck if it's not specifically drawn as a rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you do, like, we have a lot of ways, not a lot, we have sufficient ways to remove those or break through those that there is still a chance.
Yeah, like remove them or pivot into another land. It's like, oh, cool, you stopped my breach because you played Grafdigger's Cage. Well, I guess I'm just pivoting into infinitely sacrificing Dargo to my Goblin Bombardment. Oh, no.
Yep. Oh, and dude, in those games, value bombardment is my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't know, I have a bunch of 3/1 drops I don't care about. Get that shit out of here. Not my problem. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to cover up on matchups and politics.
Maybe just some political tricks that we use.
Sure.
I can go first on this one, where one of the things, and I guess I'm someone who gives a lot of politic tips in the Discord a lot to new players, a big voice on that, and that the one thing that people don't realize about the game is that you don't need agency to ask questions.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's like, you hear the blue players do it all the time, where they're like, what are you getting for that? Like, maybe they have a force of will for the piece or something like that, or like, what are you tutoring? Are you pushing here? Those kind of questions. Or it's like where they ask the table, it's like, well, can anyone help me? Like, I have this. Can anyone help me with this or back me up? You can ask the same questions. You don't need to have interaction to ask these questions. So many times a Kinnan player will put a Court of Calling or something on the stack, or a Finale, and I'll be like, what are you getting? And they're like, they talk to me as if I have interaction. They're like, oh, well, I'm thinking about this or this. It's like, it's fine. I can just get value or something like that. And they're like, is it good? I'm like, bro, I don't have interaction. Yeah, I'm just curious anyway. But it's like, they've just given me so much free information, or locked themselves into something that they didn't need to lock themselves into, because they were just like, oh, he's asking me questions, he must have something that does something. Or the other one that I do all the time is the question, does anyone have anything for this? It's like someone put something slightly scary on the stack. It's like, oh, do you guys have something for, like, it's a heuristic study, or maybe it's a tutor or something. It's like, oh, do you guys have something for this? This doesn't look good. And then people will just tell you what they have for no reason. They're like, no, I don't have anything for this. Or like, a good example was, I was at a local invitational into a really, really bad pod for me. I was going seat 4 into Andre and Ulek in seat 1. It was another person on Kinnan, and then what was it? It was I can't remember his name. The Dredge commander, the Dakiar combo. Gitrog.
Oh, Gitrog?
And Gitrog. Yeah. And I was like, I'm seat 4 into this pod. This is really bad for me. But it started getting into this mid-range thing, and Andre had popped off with a ton of artifacts. And then the Gitrog player shows me a culling ritual. And they're like, is this good here? Does this save us? And I'm like, I look at my board and it kind of hurts me, but I'm like, yeah, you should keep this. You should cast this on your turn, knowing that the other players had interaction for it. But I knew it was going to start a fight is the most important thing. And then they go, so like I set up and I just cast Dargo. I sack my stuff that would die to Culling Ritual. I cast Dargo. I'm looking at Burnt Offering, Adnaz in my hand. I just cast Dargo. I pass the turn. He puts it on the stack. And then he also has a tutor. And he's like, do you think I should get Oof with this? And I was like, oh, yeah, probably. I was like, because if it fights and you don't get it, then oof, you can just resolve the oof afterwards. And then he puts the Culling Ritual on the stack, and they start talking about it. Andre's fighting it, and Kinnan is behind. So I know they want to help the Culling Ritual resolve. They don't pitch in like points. So I look at them, I'm like, what? Like, isn't this beneficial for you? Like, don't you want to interact here to help it? And the words he said to me were, I don't have anything for instants or sorceries. And I go,
thanks, bud.
Yeah, I look at the Burnt Offering and Nog in my hand, and I go, okay, that's not what I was asking, but like,
but thank you.
But then Andre, like, he goes low to protect his board. Like, he doesn't do anything. I wait till the oof hits the battlefield so that both his mana and the Kinnan's mana is turned off. And I go, all right, cool. Before your turn, Andre, Burnt Offering Adnaz. And they're like, yeah, sure. I float 2 red off of it. I flip into the Final Fortune. I go Final Fortune. I don't ever let them get another turn. It's like,
yeah, dude.
You got to ask questions. You got to understand. Again, it goes to the flow of power, where it's like you got to understand what is important to other people, what screws them, and then you realize, okay, well, I can ask them a little question about this to see, because they're already probably thinking it's bad, and then they'll just tell you. They just tell you things.
Yeah, the other thing that I found It's really valuable. One, that's great advice. Two, CDH players love to be right. And so I don't know if you've ever sat down with like a sys before, and you'll be like, oh, are you on like trad or chowder? And if they don't answer the question, they're on chowder. And if they tell you, no, it's actually my own thing, trad is fuck, bro. 100% of the time. But the thing that I've learned about people is if you say, are you tutoring for X, Y, or Z? They'll be like, oh, no, I was actually thinking Y. Or like some other thing. And they'll just tell you because they for some reason, it triggers something in our brain where they're like, no, this was my idea and this is what I was going to do. And there's so much opportunity to gain information, and you can leverage that to both like corral that flow of power in a direction away from you, so people are less scared of what you're doing, or just understand like, oh, the thing that they have doesn't apply to me, right? They don't have anything, for instance, in sorceries. And then you're off to the races.
And then also, to tie into that, suggesting things is also very strong that people don't realize.
Yep.
When tutors are on the stack,
Yep.
Another example from a recent game, and to like understanding the flow of power, is that Blue Farm had popped off on a tournament game. Blue Farm had popped off. I stopped their breach turn with a soul partition on their breach after they cracked LED. So they had pitched their hand, whatever. They're floating some mana. They couldn't win. They were able to cast a Wishclaw Talisman before they passed their turn, and they activated it, and they gave it to the next player in turn order, and they're like, I need you to tutor for interaction here. Because very obviously Averey's going to try to pop off. If he gets another turn. And he gets it, and he's like, yeah, okay, I'll get interaction. They weren't in a good spot, and I could tell they weren't in a good spot. So I was like, okay, well, this is my opportunity to talk when they put their search on the stack. I was like, they put the search on the stack, and they're like, I really don't know what to get here. It's like, I'm not in a good spot at all. I was like, well, the thing is, right, you've screwed yourself into this deal. This is a terrible deal for you because you can't develop and hold up this interaction at the same time. I was like, the only thing you have that you could do that does that for you is Ranger Captain. It's like, if you get Ranger Captain, right, it lets you develop your board state and hold up interaction. And he was like, but you have creature combos. And I was like, yeah, I have one creature combo line in my deck, but it stops the rest of them, right? It stops every other win in my deck other than Techno Deadpool. And he's like, yeah, I guess that's fair. He's like, but you only need to cast one non-creature spell if you're going for a sack loot. And I was like, also true, but if you're scared of me, you can crack it in my upkeep. This is the only thing that doesn't screw you in this deal. Like, if you just get a Force of Will, you don't develop your board. You just are forced into holding up this Force of Will and then probably losing after you cast it. And so it was like, because I understood he was at a very far behind position already. And he's like, you know what, you're right. And he gets it, and he puts it on the stack, and then I kind of look down on my hand, and I'm like, I kind of feel bad about this, because I'm looking at Techno Deadpool in my hand. And it comes to my turn, and he cracks it on my upkeep, and I go, cool, here's Techno Deadpool.
Thanks.
And then the other player next to me says, I had a bounce spell. And he just locked me out of casting it.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, right? Is like, if you're making a deal, good players are making deals that are ever so slightly in their favor, but are actually the right answer. Like, so or at least are close enough to the right answer that it's very difficult to argue with, which in that case, Ranger Captain is probably closest to correct answer they have to maybe have a chance of winning the game.
Exactly.
But you manage your privileged information in such a way that, like, this is the highest EV thing that they can get so that I don't die elsewhere, and that it also doesn't apply to my turn.
Exactly.
And learning how to do that, and learning what different decks want to do, and how you can help navigate the table to like not exploding to those things, is a valuable skill.
But yeah, that was really, I think, the last point I want to cover on politics. So if we want to go over to flex spots and variations for the deck,
Yeah,
we can
let's do it
here. So we did highlight this core list that we had pulled up, and that was really just I had pulled the data on what are the most commonly played cards among the decks that convert at tournaments with 30 plus players. And then I added a couple of cards that we consider staples that aren't necessarily, they're new staples, so they're not necessarily showing up on the list yet. Realistically, like the list is 75, and I added 10 more. In the considering board, however, I added cards that see play in maybe my list or Jordan's list or others that are very significant to the deck but aren't showing up here. And these can tie into these like variations of the deck that see play or maybe flex slots. So they're also tagged, which is nice. So we see some interaction options that are available are like the blasts. There's things that don't normally see play, and they're seeing play more so now in these slot metas, because one of the things that people don't understand in non-blue and shorter games where you're looking at turn 3 as your window, turn 4 as your window, is that tempo plays are a thing. Tempo playing people is very big and very can lead to you winning or losing a game, where it's just like random end step. I have a blast, they have a Thrasios. Point the blast at the Thrasios. Either it screws them out of flipping or they waste interaction on this. I didn't really care about it. Either way. And then sometimes they just interact with it and they're like, here's a force of will for your blast to save my Thrasios. It's like, okay, cool. Here's a ground ball. They're on my turn. So we've seen the blast come into play a little bit more in response to the meta. We have redirect lightning is kind of, in my opinion, should be a staple. One thing that screws us in this deck once we've developed into our grand abolishers is channel abilities, and the only answer we have to channel abilities is redirects. So playing as many of them as we can is super important.
Agreed. Yeah, I think redirect. I'm on one blast in redirect. I think redirect is like not negotiable.
Yeah,
for me,
I think I'm at the same point right now as well. But we see some other fun inclusions here. Ajani being one that a couple of us in the Discord champion, Thor and me are like the main proponents. Probably Kyle as well are like the proponents of Ajani. The place that this sees play in is actually over Bowmasters for me most of the time. I've played more games with this deck where I'm not on Bowmasters than I am on Bowmasters. Notably, it's because I have such a big Kinnan and Thrasios meta, and I am more indexed into the Tymna plan. If a Bowmasters gets copied, my Tymna plan is immediately shut off. I can no longer Tymna at all, ever, because my Tymna will just die. So instead, to kind of emulate that 2 mana for 2 bodies that we love in Dargo, but also have like this interaction to ping off creatures, I play Ajani. He makes me a Tymna attacker. He's 2 Tymna attackers, and then I can just cast Dargo, sacrifice the cat, flip Ajani, and now I can ping something down. I've killed Seedborn Muses, I've killed Consecrated Sphinxes with this. Sometimes literally just continually killing a Kinnan over and over again gets you there somehow, and it's really fun to make Kinnan players mad.
Indeed it is. It's a favorite pastime.
We see things like Felia. You'll see this is a card that Sylvie champions. It's just this really good interaction that only removes pieces for 1 turn and then brings them back. And sometimes you just need, like, if you can't win, it's really nice to not feed the Ristic player a ton of cards and then let them have their Ristic so that they can interact still. But you see something like Yawgmoth shows up in a lot of lists where this is a combo piece as well as interaction, as well as a 4-mana human. It's like, it fills a lot of roles because you see the ability, pay 1 life, sacrifice a creature, put a -1/-1 counter on something, draw a card. Really what this turns into is if you have a Bergie and you can cast Dargo, it's just draw cards equal to your life total. So it's a combo that sees play, but again, if we just move on a little bit faster about these cards, you see a new host of 1-drops. We play a really large amount of 1-drops, but you can't over-index into 1-drops because then you start cutting on card quality. So a lot of us have a couple of flex slots. We have like non-negotiable 1-drops that we play in the order of like Ragavan, Esper Sentinel. Some people consider Hope of Gearper in that. The creatures that die and make treasures are among those that are uncuttable. But then everything else is kind of like seasoned to taste. You like Dragon's Rage Channel, incremental value of Dragon's Rage Channeler. Well, then you can play that. That's what I play. Do you like the combo potential of Stitcher Supplier? That's also a perfectly valid option. Meta Knight is here because it's new tech. I think this is going to become a staple, personally, but it's just new tech, so it doesn't show up. But I wanted to mention it here as an honorary 1-drop. It's better than that because there's so much synergy in the deck with it.
It's so good.
But then we also have other value pieces. Like one thing that we've been testing recently for the slop is Nova Cleric. 1 mana, 1/2 human that can blow up all of the Ristics. And some people are like, oh, you never want to hold up 3 mana like in this deck. Like that sucks. But the other thing is like, the only way we win is infinitely casting Dargo. And with a Ristic Study out, can't do that. Going into your turn, paying 3 mana to get rid of the Ristic Study so you can pop off, sometimes that's all it takes. Like, would you pay 3 mana to win the game with a Ranger Captain? Then you probably would pay 3 mana to get rid of the Ristic Studies if it meant you won.
Well, and it also it helps inhibit people from overdeveloping, which is something that you can't discount either. Where like there is a little bit of fear that gets stricken into people when it's like, oh, they could just wipe all of my enchantments whenever they want. That's not good. And that can go a long way as well.
I know Kellen has enjoyed it because he's like, yeah, it just, people don't want to play their enchantments while it's on the board.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm not really intending on popping it. It's just drawing me cards with Tymna, but like people are just scared.
Yeah, which counts for a lot.
If we look at combo pieces, there's a couple more other things that people play. I had mentioned earlier about the Reanimator package, people playing Reanimator. So here we can see Entomb and Reanimate, as well as right next to it, Razaketh and the Mass Draw effects, which again, it's not a real draw, but it's one of those big combo payoffs that win you the game if it resolves like Peer into the Abyss. Here we also see Curse Mirror, which sees play over like Jolly Balloon Man sometimes. We talked about it in the combos.
Yeah.
I think opening your window is probably one of our most interesting sections for variations and flex slots, because it's really important to us. Trying to open that window in a way that matters to let us win the game. I don't know if you want to touch a little bit on these pieces. I have like some of your extra turn spells and wheels in here.
Yeah, this is like probably the section that's like most split. So I'm on Last Chance Warriors, Oath, Vexing Bauble, and Wheel. And I think that the play pattern of like Voice or GA into Warriors Oath Last Chance for protected win is like really, really strong. It's something I'm really valuing. Because there's so many Rog-Ishais in the world right now, Vexing Bauble is like, they can't cast their Rog-Rack if you're on seat 1, or like you're ahead of them in any way in seat order. They don't cast their Rog-Rack, which means they're free interactions offline, and they're free interactions offline anyway because there's Bauble in play. And then Wheel is just like, I'm really valuing, because there's a lot of creature-based stacks in my meta right now, and I am on Bowmasters. And so it is just like a get rid of everything. It is also the only way I have to win without looping Dargo in the deck. So I have Bowmaster's Breach Wheel, which can present a win without having to loop Dargo, or you just do that until you've killed the player with 3 Rhystic Studies, and now it doesn't matter if you have to loop Dargo because you've just taken out the only draw engines on board. I also really value Wheel for like, if you're in an early seat position and you're able to develop permanent mana into a wheel, like it's something that can really hose other people. So I really value it a lot, but I've tried all of the other ones like Squelcher, Rector, Myrel, Pyre, Impercruiter. I have tried all of those at different times. But I don't know if you want to cover that section since I talked about kind of the other stuff.
Yeah, so a lot more of these cards are more common to like my list, where I'm more focused on that mid-range plan because they kind of just play into developing your board. We have things like Rector, Myrel, Pyre of Heroes, Imperial Recruiter, Squelcher. I'm currently in my test list, so I'm in my 10K public list that we can link or whatever in the description. Yeah. I was on Academy Rector. There's one you can sacrifice it to Dargo and then go get an enchantment onto the battlefield. Uncounterable Breach is kind of strong. I don't know. Maybe Yeah,
it might be good. Yeah,
but I'm not currently on it. I think it's good. It's definitely good, and it sees a lot of play in our list. But another one is just like, that's why it's an opening your window, right? I play a lot of ways to get things onto the battlefield uncounterably. All of that, a lot of that goes through Imperial Recruiter and Pyre of Heroes. Also not an Imp Recruiter right now, just testing without it. Probably will come back in. I love Imperial Recruiter, but Pyre of Heroes is a big one that a lot of people are on. And that is because it is effectively Birthing Pod, but you have to match creature types. Crazy enough, a lot of 4-mana humans are really good.
Yeah.
And we have a 3-mana human called Tymna in the command zone. So if you sacrifice Tymna to Pyre of Heroes, you can go get Ruthless Technomancer, because that's a human wizard. Notably, you can get your Academy Rector. So all of a sudden you've turned from just this value Tymna plan into, okay, well, uncounterably, here's a Rector into play. Uncounterably, here's a Breach into play. It's like all of a sudden you just went from Tymna plus Pyre of Heroes on board to uncounterably Breaches in play. You can just probably win from that. Also, Myrel, Ground Abolisher text on a 4-mana human. So, cool. Pyre of Heroes, I have the combo in my hand, activate Pyre of Heroes. Do you have a Stifle? No, here's a Ground Abolisher that came into play uncounterably. And then that is also tied into like Imperial Recruiter. And the reason I value this in the Tymna plan is that I'm playing the later game more often than other decks, other Dargo decks are. And we talked about how you can only have so many creature interaction pieces. So a creature tutor for a Grand Abolisher, it's like, well, did you have the Force of Will? No. Here's a Grand Abolisher, I guess.
Averey. Yeah.
So it's like a lot of these like interesting pieces that you can play. Pyre of Heroes is the most contentious one I think that we play, and that's just because it is kind of slow. The reason I love it is because if I'm 99% of the time casting Tymna in my games, that I have
Yep.
my main Pyre target on the board all the time. So it's a lot less
Yep.
clunky. It feels a lot clunkier if you don't want to get Tymna out, because then you have to develop into Tymna and Pyre of Heroes and activate Pyre of Heroes. So it's like, oh, well, really, I spent 5 mana on this to get whatever I
Right.
needed.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's incidental stuff too, right? If you're on Imperial Recruiter, for some reason, Taru is an advisor. So you can Pyre to into Imp Recruiter.
Well, another thing too with Imp Recruiter is that it's like there's a 1-card win condition with Imperial Recruiter, technically. Very hard to pull off because it needs like 9 mana on startup. Well, you need 9 mana total. Some of that mana is provided by Ruthless Technomancer, but Imperial Recruiter can get Ruthless Technomancer. You play it, you stack it, you can cast Dargo, sack Imperial Recruiter, reanimate Imperial Recruiter to go get Jolly Balloon Man to then go infinite there. But the other thing that, like, if you're playing Pyre of Heroes and Imperial Recruiter together, you can Imp Recruiter, get Jolly Balloon Man, sacrifice Imperial Recruiter to Pyre of Heroes to get Technomancer. So it's like there's a lot of really weird incidental, and I know Jordan said that we're human tribal at the beginning, and this is kind of the reason why. It's like you have these really weird incidental pieces that Pyre of Heroes just like pyres into. Notably, one of the biggest things in this list is that we play a lot of 1-mana humans specifically, because the 2-mana human that exists in our deck is Ground Abolisher.
Indeed. Yeah, it's, dude, I don't know. I'm like a Pyre holdout, and every time I talk about it, I'm like, damn, this is actually kind of sick, though.
I love it. It's so good with the Tymna plan. It doesn't need, like, a lot of people think that you need a lot to go with it. Like, we used to be really heavy on 4-drops where we'd play like Yawgmoth and Rector and all of these pieces because you could go get them on Pyre, and people felt like they needed a lot into it to do it. But currently, my list plays 1 Tymna Pyre target. Well, I'm testing my realm now, but traditionally, I'm playing 1 Pyre target, and that is Ruthless Technomancer for Tymna. Because it's just like 99% of the time, that's enough. Uncounterable 7 mana
is in fact good. There's a few things. I'm at time now, so I do need to.
Yeah, I think we're
wrap
pretty
it
much
up
done here anyway.
Yeah, and so, dude, this was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope this is useful to people. If there's anything that we didn't cover in this that you want to learn more about, either let us know in the comments. Join the Dargo Discord. We're both there all the time. We'd love to talk to you about it. Yeah. Any parting words for the people?
No, other than come play the deck. The deck is awesome.
Yeah.
If you're even thinking about playing the deck, hopefully this helped you. I know it was kind of long for like an intro, but you can jump around to the pieces you need or the pieces that you're wondering about. But also, come join the Discord. People are willing to talk about this deck, willing to answer questions. Like I said, the majority of our top pilots are there, and there's so many people brewing so many different iterations of the list that we're always willing to talk and help. The deck is kind of hard to get into. You will lose a lot of games starting this deck. It rewards a dedicated pilot. You can see, like we showed some of the stats, that it has a very high ceiling, has a very high floor. It performs well. We have a ton of wins in big tournaments. It just requires a dedicated hand, and it rewards it. The one thing I always tell my teammates, they're like, when are you ever going to jump off this deck? Like, why are you still playing it? The one thing I always tell them is, this deck is better than I am. Every game I've lost, there's been a way to win the game that I didn't see in the moment. Once this deck is worse than I am as a player, then I'll stop playing it. And that's not happening anytime soon.
Completely agree. And I think that, like, if you're in this format or like enjoy the aspect of pursuing like a higher level or just like incremental improvement at something, this is a deck that really, really, really rewards the time put in on it. And I think that makes it worth doing.
Yeah. But
awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the time. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.